So what do an FBI hostage negotiator, a suicide hotline worker, and like notorious cult leaders all have in common? They actually all use the exact same methods. Like, they don't use logic to persuade you.
No, not at all.
In fact, if you look closely at, history's most persuasive people, they almost never make arguments. We usually think of influence as this struggle, like a tug of war.
Yeah, exactly. You grab your facts, I grab my logic, and we just pull until someone gives up.
Right. But what if there was no rope?
And that is the perfect entry point for what we're exploring today, because we're looking at this invisible architecture of human influence. We're diving into breaks down 17 very specific sentence structures. But, and this is crucial, these aren't just, clever sales pitches.
Right. They're not just lines you memorize.
Exactly. They're actually neurological machines. Like, when you speak them, they activate something inside another person's brain, and it makes their neurology do all the heavy lifting. The persuading, deciding, surrendering. Their brain does it all.
And the specific words don't even matter that much, right? Because the words are going to change every single time depending on the situation.
Yeah, the situation changes, the person changes.
What we're really looking at is the underlying architecture. And what blew my mind is that this architecture was discovered independently over and over by people who never met.
Right, across completely different millennia.
Yeah. I mean, you have Socrates sitting across from the smartest people in Athens asking like 4 or 5 questions that made the other person's logic practically eat itself alive.
And they wouldn't even realize it was happening.
Exactly. Then you look at someone like Cicero. He didn't win Roman trials by just, arguing harder. He spoke sentences that preloaded the jury's conclusions before the defense even stood up.
And then if you fast forward to modern applications, you see the exact same architecture in extreme crisis scenarios, like the FBI negotiation model.
Right, the hostage negotiation.
Yeah, they don't teach agents to push for yes. They're trained to create conditions where the hostage taker just volunteers the words, "That's right."
Because if they say that's right,
then their brain has adopted the negotiator's reality as their own.
Wow. And it even extends to the really dark parts of human psychology, right? Like cult leaders, Manson, Jonestown, NXIVM.
Absolutely, the exact same architecture.
Because a recruiter doesn't just walk up and ask a target to surrender their life savings. That would never work. They use these sentence structures, so the recruit volunteers those things. Or, at least it feels like they're volunteering.
Right, it feels like their own idea. And there is a hidden thread connecting all 17 of these structures.
Something they all share.
Exactly. We'll get to what that is by the end. But I'd rather show you how this works before we actually name it.
So let's get into it. Divides these into 4 families. Let's start with the first set.
Okay, the first family.
These are sentences designed to make the other person argue your position for you. And the fundamental rule here is you never, ever state your position.
Right, you build a sentence where the only available logical exit is a door that you built for them to walk through.
Let's talk about the suicide hotline example. This is called the reversal, right?
Yeah, the reversal. So imagine a person calls into a suicide crisis line. They're sobbing. They want to die.
Okay.
The counselor on the other end asks, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you want to live?
And the caller says, I don't know, maybe a 3.
Now, human instinct, the tug-of-war instinct is to jump in and say, no, life is beautiful, think of your family.
Right, which just hands them the other end of the rope. They're going to pull back and tell you why their life is terrible.
Precisely. So the counselor doesn't do that. Instead, they ask, why didn't you say 2? Yeah. And suddenly, the caller has to explain why they didn't say 2. They start listing the reasons they're holding on to that 3.
Like, I really want to see my sister graduate, or I can't leave my dog.
Exactly. The counselor didn't tell them to do that. The architecture of the sentence left only one direction for their brain to move.
Toward arguing for survival. That is wild.
It is. We establish a position the listener already holds, even a terribly weak one, and ask why they don't hold a weaker version. The only way the brain can answer is to defend the stronger position.
Because they're the ones saying it. They believe it.
Exactly.
There's another one in this family called the impossible question. You ask someone, what would need to be true for this to feel like the obvious move?
The genius there is the word obvious.
Right. You aren't asking them to justify a hard choice. You're asking them to describe conditions where the decision requires 0 thought.
And while they describe those conditions, they're basically handing you the instruction manual on how to persuade them.
Yeah. This mentions this Rumpelstiltskin effect.
Yes. If you ask, What is the one single thing standing in the way? You force them to name the barrier. And in psychology, when you name the monster, it shrinks. It becomes finite.
Okay, but let me push back here for a second.
Sure.
If I try this reversal or impossible question on someone who is, like, deeply angry, say a furious client or a spouse in the middle of a fight,
Right.
it feels like it wouldn't work, like a Chinese finger trap. If they're pulling hard against me emotionally, a clever question isn't going to loosen their grip. Won't their brain just detect a trick and get more defensive?
That is a highly accurate critique. If someone is operating behind a massive wall of emotional resistance, logic doors do not work.
Okay.
The brain's threat detection system will flag your question as manipulation. You can't lead someone through a door if they are barricaded inside a fortress.
So before we build doors, we have to dissolve walls.
Exactly. Which brings us to the second family. We move from logical architecture to emotional architecture.
And the goal isn't to smash the wall, right?
No, it's to speak sentences that cause the resistance to physically collapse inside their nervous system.
Which brings up the first tool here, called the label.
Yeah, the label is about naming an emotional state with extreme accuracy before the other person has even found the word for it.
The example is looking at someone acting super defensive and saying, it doesn't sound like anger, it sounds like hurt.
To understand why that works, you have to look at the physiology. When an emotion goes unnamed, it controls you. You're operating from the brainstem and the amygdala.
The primal fight or flight part.
Exactly. The part that reflexively throws a punch.
Yeah.
But when someone else accurately labels it, especially reframing it from a fighting emotion to a vulnerable one, it forces a biological shift.
It physically moves the processing to the prefrontal cortex.
Yes, from the part of the brain that throws a punch to the part that solves a math problem.
That is fascinating, and that connects to the structure called the witness, right?
Yeah, the witness is incredibly powerful.
Saying something like, I can tell you carry a tremendous amount of weight for the people around you, and it seems like nobody has ever actually said that out loud to you.
When someone feels genuinely seen like that, a very specific part of their brain shuts down, the default mode network.
The DMN.
Right. Think of it as your brain's radar system. It's constantly scanning for social threats, maintaining your public mask. It takes immense energy.
So when you accurately witness someone, their brain registers absolute safety. The radar stops. The mask isn't needed.
You'll literally see their facial muscles soften. It's a micro collapse of their armor.
Wow. And then you can use the voluntary confession. You pause and say, there's something not being said right now, and I want you to know I can handle it.
I can handle it. That phrase is so potent.
Yeah, it doesn't sound patronizing. You're communicating immense emotional strength.
You're telling their nervous system, whatever your truth is, it won't break me. It shifts the burden.
Also talks about the refrain, like with a panic attack.
Oh, this is a profound neurological hack. A crisis counselor won't tell a panicking person to calm down.
Because telling a panicking brain to calm down is like telling a drowning person to breathe water.
Exactly. Instead, they peel the label off the experience. They say, that thing you're calling anxiety is actually readiness. It's your body pumping oxygen because this moment matters.
So it's the exact same physiological input, racing heart, shallow breath, but you trigger a totally different behavioral protocol.
If the brain files it under fear, the protocol is flee. If you help it file those sensations under readiness, the protocol becomes focus and engagement.
You didn't change their biology, you just changed the story driving it.
Precisely.
Okay, so if you're listening to this, you might be thinking, all right, I've asked the impossible question, I've labeled their emotions, the walls are down.
But now there's a new problem.
Right. A brain without a defensive wall feels vulnerable. It panics and thinks, wait, who am I in this new dynamic?
Which brings us to the third family of influence. Sentences that install or confirm a specific identity.
This might be my favorite category. Especially the accusation inversion.
Oh, it's so good.
Imagine you're in a negotiation with a tough client. You look at them and say, you know, you're probably not the kind of person who just goes all in because your gut says to.
The reaction is almost violently predictable. Human beings have this deep, reflexive need to defend their autonomy.
So they immediately push back and say, actually, I trust my gut all the time.
And they just handed you a voluntary confession of how they want to be perceived. They claim the identity of a bold decision maker.
Out loud.
Out loud. And once a person claims an identity out loud, their own brain becomes the police force that enforces it.
Because of cognitive dissonance, we hate it.
Right. We'll do almost anything to ensure our future actions align with the identity we just publicly claimed.
Which perfectly sets up the structure called the gap.
Yeah.
Let's say that same client starts dragging their feet a week later. You don't get angry. You just say, I'm surprised you're hesitating. That doesn't seem like you.
You've created a psychological fracture. You highlight the gap between their current behavior and the decisive identity they already claimed.
So they either have to accept a diminished version of themselves or close the gap by taking action.
And almost universally, people take the action to protect the identity.
It's incredible how predictable we are. There's also the conspiracy structure, lowering your voice and saying, look, most people aren't ready to hear what we're talking about right now.
Instant tribal bonding. It's an evolutionary trope. You've drawn a circle, and it's just you and them inside the circle of the enlightened.
And their loyalty to you just skyrockets.
It installs the identity of an insider.
So we've moved from getting them to build the case, to dropping their walls, to installing an identity. The final family is about creating inevitability.
Closing the exits. So the desired outcome feels like an inescapable reality.
This requires shifting from logistics to legacy. The architecture here is called installation.
Right. You say something like, this stopped being about the money a long time ago. This is about whether you're going to keep living the same year over and over again.
Identity beats logistics 100% of the time. If you argue about interest rates or timelines, you're back in the tug of war.
But if you reframe it as a test of whether they are growing and stagnating, the logistics evaporate.
But what if their calculating brain is just too rigid to accept that reframe?
Then you use regression. You ask a question designed to bypass the cynic entirely by accessing a highly specific childhood memory.
Like asking, do you remember the first time somebody really believed in you? And I mean, not the polite kind.
That modifier, not the polite kind, does all the heavy lifting. It forces their brain to search for a moment of profound, vulnerable connection.
And when they access it, they actually regress physiologically. For a few moments, the calculating adult is offline.
They inhabit the nervous system of that younger, more open self. And whatever you say next lands on a much more receptive system.
Which sets up the fait accompli, placing them in a concrete future.
Yeah, you ask the morning after you do this, what is that very first feeling you have when you wake up?
Notice it's not if you decide to do this, it's the morning after you do this.
You are building a sensory reality. As they answer, they're imagining the sunlight, the smell of the coffee, the relief.
Deciding not to move forward suddenly feels like losing something they've already experienced.
Loss aversion kicks in perfectly.
Nah.
And that paves the way for the ultimate closing architecture, the exit seal.
You drop all pretense and simply say you already know what you need to do and you've known for a little while.
Zero push in that sentence.
You're implying the answer is inside them, they've been avoiding it, and you can see right through the avoidance. It leaves them entirely alone with their own intuition.
It really does. Which brings us back to the central mystery we set up at the beginning.
Yes, the one thread all 17 sentences share, the underlying code.
And it is profound in its simplicity. Not a single one of these 17 sentences tells the other person what to think.
Not one argues a position.
Not one uses brute force.
There's literally no rope.
Precisely. To you listening right now, the most powerful sentence you will ever speak in a complex negotiation or, a crisis with a loved one is one where you say almost nothing about your own demands.
True influence is about creating the conditions where the other person's own mind does the persuading.
And the deciding. And the surrendering.
It totally shatters how we are taught to communicate.